The dust of Mars swirled around Captain John Miller as he walked through the old military base. The facility had been abandoned for over 50 years, since before humans met their first aliens. John was only here because of old maps his team had found in Earth's archives. "Sir, you need to see this," called Sam Young, one of John's junior officers. Sam stood at the entrance of a huge door built into the red Martian rock. John hurried over, his heart beating faster. The Earth Diplomatic Corps had sent him to find anything that might help humans gain respect in the Galactic Council. Lately, the alien species had been treating humans like children who needed guidance. "We got the door systems working," Sam said. "Whatever's in there has been sealed tight since 2097. John nodded and pressed his hand against the scanner. To his surprise, it still recognized human DNA, and the heavy doors slowly slid open. Stale air rushed out, and the team switched on their lights. "My God," whispered John as their beams cut through the darkness. Inside the mountain was a massive hangar, and in that hangar sat a ship unlike any John had ever seen. It was sleek and black, with sharp angles and heavy weapon mounts along its hull. Nothing like the rounded, peaceful ships humans now use to travel between stars. "That's a warship," said Linda Harris, the team's historian. "From the resource wars, before we united Earth, and long before we met aliens." She walked forward, her light shining on the name painted on the hull. U.S. Defiant. John circled the ship slowly. It was huge, at least 500 meters long. "I thought all the warships were destroyed in the peace agreements." "So did everyone else," Linda said, scanning the ship with her device. "This one was hidden away. According to these records, it was the last one built, with all the most advanced weapons Earth had invented." John's team spread out, examining the silent giant. The ship looked ready to fly, preserved perfectly in the dry, sealed environment. "Captain, you need to see the weapons systems," called Frank Howard, their technical expert. He had managed to access a computer terminal. "This ship has something called the Hellfire Array." John looked at the technical readouts and felt a chill. The array could generate energy blasts more powerful than anything the current Galactic Council races had. Even the Vecnar, the most warlike species in the galaxy, didn't have weapons this advanced. "Why would we hide this?" Sam asked. Linda sighed. "After the wars, humans wanted to forget. We were ashamed of how close we came to destroying ourselves. When aliens contacted us 30 years after the wars ended, we presented ourselves as peaceful explorers, not warriors." John ran his hand along the cold metal of the ship. "The Council thinks we're weak. They think we need their protection. They have no idea what humans are capable of." "What do we do with it?" Frank asked. John thought carefully. Earth's position in galactic politics was precarious. Humans were seen as the new naive species, good at trade and diplomacy, but not taken seriously in matters of security or defense. "We reported," John decided. "But first, let's see if it still works." The team spent hours examining the ship. To their amazement, the preservation systems had kept everything intact. With minimal power, they'd brought the main systems online. Lights flickered across the dark hull as the ancient warship woke from its long sleep. "This could change everything," Linda said quietly. "The Council has no idea humans once built ships like this." John nodded. "The Galactic Summit is in 3 months. If we can restore this ship fully, we could bring it there, show the galaxy what humanity really is." As the Defiant's engines hummed to life for the first time in decades, John knew they had found something that would shock the stars. Humans weren't just peaceful traders. They were survivors of their own violent past, who chose peace despite having the claws to fight. He opened his communication device. "This is Captain Miller to Earth Command. We found something that will change our place in the galaxy." The Earth Council chamber was filled with worried voices. On the large screen at the front of the room, images of the U.S. Defiant floated in the air. Captain John Miller stood quietly, waiting for the shouting to stop. "This ship could ruin everything we've built with the aliens," said Ambassador William Peters. He was an older man with gray hair who had helped humans join the Galactic Council 15 years ago. "They trust us because we are peaceful. This warship makes us look like liars." Defense Secretary Mary Collins shook her head. "We never lied. We simply never mentioned our past. Every species has wars in their history. Not with weapons like these." Ambassador Peters pointed to the Hellfire array specifications. "The Vecnar would see this as a threat. They barely tolerate us now." John stepped forward. "With respect, Ambassador, the Vecnar barely tolerate us because they think we're weak. They push us around in trade deals and ignore our votes in the Council." The room grew quiet. Everyone knew it was true. Humans had the smallest territory and the least influence in galactic politics, despite being skilled diplomats and traders. Admiral George Taylor, an older man who had served in Earth's space fleet for 40 years, stood up slowly. "I served on similar ships in my youth, before first contact. We built these vessels not because we wanted war, but because we needed to protect ourselves." He walked to the front of the room and looked at the images of the Defiant. "This ship represents something important about humans that the galaxy does not understand. We are peaceful by choice, not because we lack teeth." President Laura Baker listened carefully to both sides. Finally, she spoke. "What exactly are you suggesting, Admiral?" "The Galactic Summit begins in 3 months. I suggest we restore the Defiant to working order and bring it to the summit as a ceremonial vessel. We can be honest about our past and show the Council that humans chose peace despite having the capability for war." Ambassador Peters looked alarmed. "The Council will see it as a threat." "Only if we act like we're threatening them," Mary Collins countered. "We present it as history, as part of our journey to peace." John thought about the ship sitting in the Mars hangar. "The Defiant is fully intact. My team believes we can have it operational in 2 months if we bring in the right experts." The debate continued for hours. Some council members wanted to hide the ship again. Others wanted to dismantle it. But Admiral Taylor's words had struck a chord with many. President Baker finally raised her hand for silence. "We joined the Galactic Council as equals, but we have not been treated as such. Perhaps it's time the other species understood humans better." She looked at John. "Captain Miller, you will oversee the restoration of the U.S. Defiant. We will bring it to the summit as Admiral Taylor suggests." Ambassador Peters looked worried. "This is a dangerous game, Madam President." "It's not a game at all," she replied firmly. "It's honesty. Humans have a right to our history, and the Council should know who they're really dealing with." As the meeting ended, Admiral Taylor approached John. "You found her for a reason, Captain. The Defiant was the last and greatest of our warships. She represents the height of human military achievement before we turn to peace." John nodded. "Who should I get for the restoration team?" "I know just the people," Admiral Taylor said. "Chief Engineer Susan Wright led the refit of our diplomatic vessels. She knows old tech better than anyone. And you'll need weapons specialist Frank Martinez. He studied the old war systems. What about historical context?" John asked. "Dr. Alan Rogers wrote the definitive history of the resource wars. Get him on board too. And Tactical Officer Diane Clark. She understands both old combat systems and modern galactic politics." John felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. In 3 months, humans would shock the Galactic Council with a revelation about their past. He just hoped the aliens would understand that humans weren't hiding their teeth out of deception, but out of a genuine desire for peace. "We start tomorrow," he said. The Mars hangar buzzed with activity. 50 engineers and specialists worked around the clock on the U.S. Defiant. Chief Engineer Susan Wright stood on a platform near the ship's main engine, directing the restoration efforts. "Careful with those power couplings," she called to a team working below. "They're old but extremely powerful. One wrong connection could fry the whole system." Captain John Miller walked through the busy hangar, impressed by the progress. In just 3 weeks, the team had restored most of the basic functions of the warship. The Defiant was beginning to look less like an ancient relic and more like an operational vessel. "How's it going, Chief?" John asked as he climbed up to Susan's platform. Susan wiped sweat from her forehead. "Better than expected, Captain. Whoever stored this ship did an amazing job. The preservation systems kept everything intact. We've got life support and engines at about 80% already." "And the weapons systems?" John asked more quietly. Susan glanced around and lowered her voice. "Frank Martinez is working on the Hellfire array now. It's complicated. The technology is unlike anything we use today, more advanced in some ways." John followed Susan to a secure area where weapons specialist Frank Martinez was carefully examining complex systems inside an open panel. Diagrams and old technical manuals were spread out around him. "Captain," Frank nodded as they approached. "You've got to see this." He pointed to components inside the panel. The Hellfire array wasn't just a weapon. It was experimental technology that was never fully documented. "What does that mean?" John asked. "It means," said Dr. Alan Rogers, joining them with a tablet in his hand, "that this ship was more advanced than even the military records showed." The historian had been researching old files since the project began. "According to these records I just decrypted, the array could generate energy yields that would outclass even the modern warships of the Vecnar Empire." John's eyes widened. The Vecnar were the most powerful military force in the galaxy. Their ships were feared throughout Council space. "Are you certain?" he asked. Dr. Rogers nodded. "The scientists who developed this technology were years ahead of their time. They created a way to focus massive energy into precise beams that could disable or destroy targets with minimal power consumption." Tactical Officer Diane Clark joined their small group. "The implications are significant, Captain. If this information is correct, the Defiant isn't just a historical curiosity. It's a warship that could still hold its own against modern galactic vessels." John felt uneasy. What had started as a plan to show humanity's past was becoming something more complicated. "Remember our mission. We're restoring this ship for ceremonial purposes, to show the Council our history, not to demonstrate military power." Susan nodded. "Of course, Captain. But we still need to make sure all systems are operational for the journey to the summit. That includes the array." "Proceed with the restoration," John ordered. "But keep the array's true capabilities classified for now. Only the 5 of us need to know what it can really do." As the team returned to work, John walked the length of the massive warship. The Defiant was nearly 500 meters of black metal and weaponry, designed during a time when humans fought each other for resources. Now it would represent Earth to the galaxy. The ship's bridge was almost fully restored. John sat in the captain's chair, running his hand along the controls. In 6 weeks, he would command this vessel to the galactic summit. He would show the Council a side of humanity they had never seen before. A communication alert sounded on his device. It was Admiral Taylor. "Progress report, Captain. Restoration is ahead of schedule, Admiral. The Defiant will be ready." "Excellent. The Council has just confirmed our place at the summit. They're curious about our historical vessel." The Vecnar representative seemed particularly interested. John thought about the Hellfire array and what Dr. Rogers had discovered. "Sir, there's something you should know about the Defiant's capabilities." "Tell me in person, Captain," Admiral Taylor interrupted. "Some information shouldn't be transmitted, even on secure channels." John understood. If the Defiant was truly as powerful as they now believed, that information needed to be protected. The other species in the Galactic Council weren't always friendly, especially the Vecnar. "Yes, sir. I'll report to Earth Command tomorrow." As John ended the call, he looked again at the bridge of the ancient warship. In less than 2 months, this vessel would change how the galaxy viewed humanity forever. The U.S. Defiant moved smoothly out of Mars orbit, its black hull reflecting the distant sunlight. On the bridge, Captain John Miller watched his crew work at their stations. These were Earth's finest. Navigator Lisa Brown, Communications Officer Kevin Johnson, Security Chief Paul Garcia, and Science Officer Helen White. Course set for the Galactic Summit, Captain, Lisa said, her fingers moving across the navigation controls. We'll reach the jump point in 30 minutes. John nodded. The Defiant had been fully restored, its systems updated just enough to make the journey safely while preserving its historical significance. For the past week, the crew had been training to operate the old warship. Status report, John ordered. Helen looked up from her station. All systems functioning normally, Captain. The Defiant is performing better than expected for a ship that sat idle for over 50 years. John smiled. The restoration team had done amazing work. The ship looked almost exactly as it had during the Resource Wars, but with subtle modern upgrades hidden throughout. Chief Engineer Susan Wright had stayed on as part of the crew, monitoring the engines from below deck. Captain, Kevin called from communications. Message from Earth Command. Admiral Taylor wishes us good luck and reminds us that the Vecnar delegation has requested to inspect the Defiant before we dock at the summit station. John frowned. The Vecnar were the most militaristic species in the Galactic Council. Their empire controlled 30 star systems, and their warships patrolled Council space as self-appointed peacekeepers. Ever since humans joined the Council, the Vecnar had treated them with barely hidden contempt. Send acknowledgement, John replied. Tell the Admiral we'll follow the diplomatic protocols. The Defiant reached the jump point, and Lisa activated the faster-than-light drive. The stars blurred, and the ship entered the jump space that allowed travel between distant systems. 3 days later, they arrived at the Galactic Summit Station. The massive structure hung in space like a metal flower, with docking arms extending from a central hub. Ships from every Council species were already there. We're being hailed by Summit Control, Kevin announced. On screen, John ordered. A blue-skinned alien appeared on the main display. Earth Vessel Defiant. This is Summit Control. Please hold position at marker Alpha 7. The Vecnar delegation has requested to board before you dock. John exchanged glances with Paul Garcia. This was unusual. Standard procedure would have the Defiant dock first, then receive visitors. Acknowledged Summit Control. We'll hold position at Alpha 7. An hour later, a sleek Vecnar shuttle approached the Defiant. The Vecnar were tall, reptilian beings with scaled skin and sharp features. Their military uniforms were black and red, covered in symbols of rank and achievement. John, Paul, and Ambassador Peters, who had joined the mission despite his misgivings, met the Vecnar delegation in the Defiant's docking bay. Commander Krex, the Vecnar military attaché, stepped forward. He was nearly 7 feet tall, his yellow eyes scanning the human ship with obvious suspicion. Captain Miller, he said in a deep voice, the Vecnar High Command is interested in your historical vessel. We request a full inspection before you dock at the summit station. Ambassador Peters stepped forward. Commander Krex, we've provided all required documentation to the Council. The Defiant is here as a cultural exhibit, nothing more. Commander Krex's mouth formed what might have been a smile, but looked more like a predator baring its teeth. Of course, Ambassador, but Council security protocols allow for inspection of any military vessel, even museum pieces. John maintained a neutral expression. We'd be happy to give you a tour, Commander. The Defiant is an important part of human history. As they led the Vecnar delegation through the ship, John noticed how carefully Krex examined everything. The commander lingered at weapons stations, studied the bridge layout, and asked pointed questions about the ship's capabilities. When they reached the engine room, Krex stared at the power core for a long time. Interesting design. So inefficient by modern standards, yet familiar somehow. Susan Wright kept her face neutral. Early human technology, Commander. Before we develop more peaceful applications. Krex turned his yellow eyes to John. You humans are full of surprises, Captain Miller. This ship is not what I expected. John met the alien's gaze steadily. Humanity's past might surprise many in the Council, Commander. We look forward to sharing it at the summit." After the inspection, the Vecnar departed, and the Defiant was finally cleared to dock. As the ship connected to the summit station, John couldn't shake the feeling that Commander Krex had recognized more than he let on. "He knows," Paul said quietly beside him. "He knows this isn't just an old relic." John nodded. "Yes. But knowing and proving are two different things. Let's proceed with the mission." The Galactic Summit Station buzzed with activity. Delegates from 37 species moved through the grand halls, discussing trade, borders, and the latest scientific discoveries. The U.S. Defiant had become the main attraction, docked at a special viewing port where everyone could see it. Captain John Miller and Ambassador Peters stood in the ship's main airlock, greeting yet another group of curious aliens. This time, it was the Zolari, a species of tall, thin beings with pale blue skin and 4 arms. They touched their foreheads in greeting. "We are most interested in your war vessel," said the lead Zolari. "Our historical records show humans as peaceful traders who barely had space travel when discovered. This ship suggests otherwise." Ambassador Peters smiled diplomatically. "Humans achieved space travel and then turned our focus to peaceful exploration. The Defiant represents our earlier history, before we understood the benefits of galactic cooperation." The Zolari nodded, though they looked unconvinced. John led them through the ship, showing the command bridge, crew quarters, and medical bay, but carefully avoiding the weapons systems and the Hellfire array control room. As the day progressed, more delegations came to tour what they all called a museum piece, or historical curiosity. Most were polite, some were clearly impressed, but none seemed threatened by the old warship. Except the Vecnar. Commander Krex returned with 3 military scientists. They requested access to the engine room again, claiming interest in primitive human engineering. John could tell they were looking for something specific. "You seem very interested in our old technology, Commander," John said as they walked through the lower decks. Krex's yellow eyes narrowed. "History interests me, Captain Miller, especially when it contradicts what we know." He gestured to a sealed door. "What's in there?" John kept his expression neutral. Behind that door was the Hellfire Array Control Center. "Storage. Nothing of interest." Krex stared at John for a moment too long, then nodded. "Of course." Later that evening, John met with his senior crew in his quarters aboard the Defiant. "The Vecnar are suspicious," he told them. "They've requested a full technical inspection, citing Council security protocols." Paul Garcia, the security chief, frowned. "We can't allow that. They discover the true capabilities of the array. Ambassador Peters is trying to block the request through diplomatic channels," John replied. "But the Vecnar have significant influence in the Council." Lisa Brown looked worried. "Why are they so interested?" "This ship is old by their standards." Dr. Alan Rogers, who had joined the crew as historian, spoke up. "I've been researching Vecnar history. During our resource wars, they were already an interstellar species. They might have been watching Earth." The room grew quiet as they considered this. "You think they recognize the technology?" Susan Wright asked. "I think they recognize its potential," Rogers replied. "The Hellfire Array was theoretical science even for us. If it works as designed, it represents technology the Vecnar thought only they possessed." John was about to respond when his communication device buzzed. It was Ambassador Peters. "Captain, the opening ceremony starts in 1 hour. The Council chairperson has requested that you attend, along with your senior officers. The Defiant will be formally presented to the Council." "We'll be there," John confirmed. As they prepared for the ceremony, Helen White approached John privately. "Captain, our sensors detected unusual activity near the station's outer ring. 3 ships running without identification signals." John frowned. "Did you report it to station security?" "Yes, sir. They said they would investigate, but seemed unconcerned." Something about this bothered John. "Keep our sensors active, Helen. Let me know if those ships return." The crew changed into their formal uniforms and prepared to leave for the ceremony. As Captain Miller took one last look at his ship, he noticed Commander Krex watching the Defiant from a nearby observation deck. The Vecnar's posture was tense, his gaze fixed on the warship as if trying to solve a puzzle. John had a growing feeling that bringing the Defiant to the summit wasn't just revealing human history. It was stirring up secrets that some would prefer to remain hidden. As he left to join the ceremony, he quietly ordered Paul to keep a security team aboard the ship. "No one enters without my direct authorization," he said, "especially the Vecnar." The Grand Council chamber was packed with representatives from every species in the galaxy. Captain John Miller and his crew stood at attention as Ambassador Peters addressed the assembly. The large viewing screen showed the U.S. Defiant docked at the station. "This vessel represents an important chapter in human history," Peters explained. "Before we joined the galactic community, Earth went through a period of conflict we call the Resource Wars. The Defiant was built during that time." The council chairperson, a tall being with translucent skin named Sori, leaned forward. "Your species has always presented itself as primarily peaceful, Ambassador. This warship suggests otherwise." Before Peters could respond, Commander Krex stood. "The Vecnar delegation wishes to formally note our concern. This vessel's design suggests capabilities beyond what humans have disclosed to the Council." Murmurs spread through the chamber. John exchanged worried glances with his crew. Ambassador Peters maintained his composure. "The Defiant is over 50 years old, Commander. It represents technology humans developed independently, before we knew other species existed." The debate might have continued, but suddenly the lights in the chamber flickered. A moment later, a loud explosion shook the station. "We are under attack," shouted a security officer, rushing into the chamber. "Multiple hostile ships have breached our outer defenses." The council erupted in panic. Captain Miller's communication device buzzed. It was Helen White, who had remained aboard the Defiant. "Captain, 3 warships just decloaked near the station. They're firing on the power grid and communication array. Station defenses are struggling to respond." Another explosion rocked the station, stronger than the first. The lights went out completely, leaving only emergency lighting. "Who's attacking us?" John demanded when the station's security chief entered the chamber. "The Scrath," the alien officer replied grimly. "We thought they were extinct after the last council purge. They're disabling our systems one by one." The Scrath were a pirate faction known for attacking council facilities. They had disappeared 20 years ago after a military campaign led by the Vecnar. Council chairperson Thori looked shaken. "Our defense fleet is 3 hours away. The station's shields are failing." Another blast hit the station. The floor trembled beneath them. "Life support is damaged," announced a station technician. "We have maybe 2 hours before it fails completely." John made a quick decision. "The Defiant has weapons. We can defend the station." Commander Krex laughed coldly. "That ancient vessel. Against modern Scrath raiders, it would be destroyed in minutes." John ignored him and turned to Chairperson Sori. "The Defiant was designed for combat. Let us help." Sori looked uncertain. "A museum ship against battle-ready raiders. It's not just a museum ship," John said firmly. "It's a warship built by humans during our most aggressive period. It has capabilities you haven't seen." The station shook again. A support beam crashed down at the far end of the chamber. "The station's defensive systems are offline," reported the security chief. "We're completely exposed." Chairperson Thori looked at the worried faces of the council delegates, then back to John. "Very well, Captain Miller. You have council authorization to engage." John immediately contacted his crew, battle stations, everyone back to the ship immediately. As they rushed through the corridors toward the docking bay, Paul Garcia received updates from the security team left aboard the Defiant. "The Scrath ships are targeting the station's reactor, Captain. If they hit it." John nodded grimly. "Everyone on the station would die." They reached the Defiant, and hurried to the bridge. Through the viewports, they could see the 3 Scrath vessels, sleek, modern warships firing relentlessly at the defenseless station. "Power up all systems," John ordered as he took the captain's chair. "Susan, ready the engines. Lisa, plot an intercept course." The Defiant hummed to life around them. Lights and screens activated as the ancient warship prepared for battle for the first time in over 50 years. "The Scrath are hailing us," Kevin reported from communications. "Audio only." "Let's hear it," John said. A harsh voice filled the bridge. "Human vessel, return to your dock. This is not your fight. We have no quarrel with Earth." John pressed the response button. "This is Captain Miller of the U.S. Defiant. The station is under Council protection, which includes Earth. Cease your attack immediately." Laughter came through the speakers. "An antique human ship dares to challenge us. Stand down, Captain, or you'll join the scrap heap of history." John looked at his crew. Each face showed determination and resolve. "Weapons status?" he asked Frank Martinez, who had joined them as weapons officer. Frank's fingers moved across the controls. "All standard weapons online, Captain." He lowered his voice. "The Hellfire array is charged and ready." John nodded. "Take us out, Navigator. Let's show the galaxy what humans can do." The U.S. Defiant moved away from the station, its engines glowing blue against the black of space. On the bridge, Captain John Miller watched the 3 Scrath ships circling the damaged station like hungry sharks. "Tactical assessment," John ordered. Paul Garcia studied his screens. 3 Scrath vessels, Captain, heavily armed with modern weapons. Their shields are military grade. He paused. "Sir, they outmatch us in every standard category." John nodded. "Standard being the key word, Mr. Garcia." On the station, council members gathered at the observation windows to watch. Many whispered that the humans were brave but foolish. Commander Krex stood silently, his yellow eyes fixed on the Defiant. "Approaching Scrath ships," Lisa announced from navigation. "They're adjusting course to meet us." The lead Scrath vessel fired a warning shot that blazed past the Defiant's bow. The old warship shuddered slightly but held steady. "They're hailing us again," Kevin said. The harsh voice of the Scrath commander filled the bridge once more. "Your ship is ancient, human. Return to the station, and we may spare your lives. This is your final warning." John didn't respond. Instead, he turned to Frank Martinez at the weapons station. "Target their lead ship's engines. Standard weapons only for now." Frank nodded and targeted the Scrath vessel. The Defiant's conventional weapons, laser cannons from the Resource Wars era, fired in a bright stream of energy. The beams hit the Scrath ship's shields, which flared but held. The Scrath ships responded immediately. All 3 fired their weapons at the Defiant. The old warship rocked under the assault. "Shields holding at 82%, Helen reported. "Those were just their secondary weapons, Captain." On the main viewer, they could see the Scrath ships spreading out to surround them. The pirates clearly didn't consider the Defiant a serious threat. "They're toying with us," Lisa said quietly. John nodded. "That works to our advantage." He opened a channel to engineering. "Susan, how's the power core handling?" "Beautiful, Captain," Susan Wright responded. "This old girl has plenty of fight left in her." The Scrath ships fired again, this time with greater power. The Defiant shook more violently. "Shields at 64%, Helen reported. "One more hit like that, and we'll start taking damage." John looked at Frank. "Time for the Hellfire array. Target their lead ship's weapon systems. Low power setting." Frank's hands moved across the ancient controls, activating systems that had been dormant for decades. Deep in the ship, the experimental weapon system powered up. "Hellfire array charged and ready, Captain," Frank reported. "Target locked." In the council observation room, Commander Krex suddenly stiffened. His sensors had detected an energy buildup in the human ship that shouldn't be possible. "Fire," John ordered. The Defiant seemed to shimmer for a moment. There was no visible beam, no explosive projectile. Instead, a ripple of blue energy spread from the ship in a focused wave toward the Lid Scrath vessel. When it hit, the effect was immediate. The Scrath ship shields flared brilliantly, then collapsed. The wave continued through the ship, causing systems to shut down one by one. The pirate vessel drifted powerless, its weapons and engines disabled. Silence fell on the Defiant's bridge. The crew stared in amazement. The Hellfire array had worked perfectly, disabling the enemy ship without destroying it. "By the stars," whispered Lisa. In the observation room, the council members pressed against the windows in shock. What they had just witnessed defied their understanding of human technology. Commander Krex's scaled face showed both fear and respect. "I knew it," he whispered. The two remaining Scrath ships hesitated, clearly surprised by what had happened to their Lid vessel. Then, with newfound caution, they began to circle the Defiant. "They're scanning us, trying to figure out what we just did," Helen reported. The Scrath commander's voice came through again, but this time the arrogance was gone. "What weapon is this? No human ship has such technology." John opened the channel. "This is Captain Miller. As you can see, the Defiant is more than an antique. Surrender now, or we'll be forced to disable your remaining vessels." Instead of answering, the Scrath ships attacked simultaneously, firing all weapons at the Defiant. The old warship rocked under the barrage. "Shields at 41%, Helen called out. "They're throwing everything at us now." John narrowed his eyes. They had their chance. "Frank, target both ships. Full power to the array." The Defiant hummed as the Hellfire array charged to full capacity. The blue energy rippled out again, this time splitting into two waves that struck both pirate ships simultaneously. Like the first, their shields collapsed and their systems went dark. All three Scrath vessels now drifted helpless in space. John opened a channel to the station. "Captain Miller to Summit Station. The Scrath ships have been neutralized. You can send boarding parties to take them into custody." There was a long pause before Chairperson Sori's voice responded, sounding stunned. "Acknowledged, Captain Miller. The Council thanks you." John looked at his proud crew and nodded. "Take us back to the station, Lisa. I believe we have some explaining to do." The emergency session of the Galactic Council began 3 hours after the Scrath ships were captured. The council chamber had been moved to a secondary room since the main chamber was damaged in the attack. Captain John Miller stood before the assembled delegates, flanked by Admiral Taylor, who had arrived on an emergency shuttle from Earth. The room buzzed with excited conversations. Every species representative wanted to speak about what they had witnessed. Chairperson Sori called for order several times before the noise finally died down. "Captain Miller," Sori began, "the Council owes you and your crew a debt of gratitude. Without the Defiant's intervention, many lives would have been lost." Miller nodded respectfully. "We did what any council member would do to protect others." A representative from the Araxian Federation stood up. "The question before us is not the humans' bravery, but their deception. This historical vessel clearly possesses technology far beyond what humans have shared with the Council." Several delegates voiced their agreement. Commander Krex then rose from his seat, his tall form towering over the other representatives. "The Vecnar delegation demands answers," he said firmly. "The weapon used by the Defiant is unlike anything humans have declared in their technology indexes. We consider this a serious breach of Council security protocols." Admiral Taylor stepped forward. "If I may address the Council." When Sori nodded, Taylor continued. "What you saw today was not deception, but revelation. Humans developed the Hellfire array technology during our darkest hours, when we fought among ourselves for Earth's limited resources." The Admiral paused, looking around the chamber. "When we achieved peace and later joined the galactic community, we chose not to develop such weapons further. Not because we couldn't, but because we chose a different path." A Zolari representative spoke up. Yet you kept this ship, with its weapons intact. Yes, Taylor admitted. As a reminder of what we were capable of, and what we chose to leave behind. The Defiant wasn't hidden out of deception, but preserved as a monument to our decision to pursue peace instead of war. The council chamber grew quiet as the delegates considered his words. Commander Krex studied the humans carefully. The Vecnar have always considered humans to be soft, Krex said finally. Perhaps we were mistaken. John stepped forward. The Defiant represents what humans can do when threatened, but it also represents a choice we made. We could have built more ships like this. Instead, we built diplomatic vessels and trading ships. Chairperson Story conferred quietly with several senior council members before addressing the chamber again. The revelation of human military capability changes many assumptions held by this council. Some see this as concerning, others as reassuring. Story turned to Admiral Taylor. What does Earth propose now that this capability is known? Admiral Taylor smiled. A new technology-sharing initiative, with humans leading the development of defensive systems like the Hellfire Array, technology that can disable aggressors without destroying them. The galaxy needs protection, not more weapons of mass destruction. The Council debated for hours. Some species called for restrictions on human technology, while others welcomed the idea of new defensive systems. In the end, the vote was decisive. The Council approved the new initiative and designated the Defiant as a protected historical vessel. As the session ended, Commander Krex approached John and Admiral Taylor. "You humans are more interesting than we thought," he said, the hint of a smile on his reptilian face. "The Vecnar respects strength, especially when it is tempered with wisdom." 2 weeks later, Captain Miller stood on the observation deck of the Defiant, now orbiting Earth. A holographic display showed the plans for the new Joint Defense Initiative being constructed near Jupiter. Ships from 12 Council species were already working together on the project. Admiral Taylor joined him at the viewport. "Not bad for an old warship, hey, Captain?" John smiled. The Defiant was built to win wars. Instead, it may have helped build a lasting peace. Below them, Earth shone blue and green in the sunlight. Humanity's place in the galaxy had changed forever. They were no longer seen as the naive newcomers who needed protection, but as equals who had chosen peace despite having the claws to fight. "What happens to the Defiant now?" John asked. "She'll be a training vessel and a reminder," Taylor replied, "of who we were, who we are, and who we choose to be." John nodded, watching as a Vecnar diplomatic ship passed by, offering a formal salute to the ancient human warship that had shocked the galactic community and changed its future forever.